I'm very happy to see that quite a lot of you are here and still coming in. Hi, Randy. Hi, Yvette. How are you doing?
Hey there, how are you?
Look at you, so happy, so energetic, not tired at all. Lucky you.
Good morning.
Oh my God, morning.
It's
Okay,
not morning, good afternoon there.
you're gonna be talking about a long way to the top if you want a CTO, right?
That's right.
Yep. Okay. And I want to really strongly remind and advise the audience, both online and here, that we will have little to no time for questions. Sorry, the last session. And we are in a cinema. People will want to see a movie just after we finish. So if you have any questions mid-session, mid-speech, please write them in the chat. I will try to ask as many as I can. And don't hesitate. If you might have a question, put your hand up. Okay? Stage is yours. Randy and Yvette. Let's go.
All right. Well, thank you. Great to be back at Build Stuff, although I'd love to be there with you in person in Vilnius. Yvette and I have been around the block for a while, and both of us have been CTOs. And so we get asked a lot about career development. And so what we thought is we'd put together some of our thoughts of things that we've learned about career development over time and advice we've given others and advice we wish that somebody had given to us. And of course, you know, with typical rocker Build Stuff situation, we wanted to do it with 80s music. So it's a long way to the top if you want a CTO. The first section introduced here is by Oingo Boingo. So who do you want to be? So when I get asked by mentees of mine or people that want career development for advice, the first thing I say is, well, find somebody that you know, that you see, and what career, you know, see about the career path of theirs. So find somebody that you admire, figure out how they got where they are, and then what can you learn from their career trajectory? And by the way, it's totally okay if that person is your boss or the CTO of your company or the CEO of your company. So I'll give a few examples of people in my life. So first is this guy. This is Hugh Williams. So he was one of my mentors at eBay the first time I was there. I've just come back. He was a PhD in an expert in search engine indexing. He was a professor at Australia's Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, so they're MIT. Then he worked at Microsoft on Bing, so like an incredible technical talent and world-class at all sorts of particular technical topics, but also a really great human and a fantastic people leader. So he's one of the people that I still stay in contact with even 10 years later after we stopped working with each other, but somebody that I really admire and look up to. Another person that I really look up to in my career is this guy, Mike Smith. So when I was an engineering leader at Stitch Fix a couple of years ago, Mike Smith was the COO of the company, the chief operating officer. And I still remember distinctly when he interviewed me to take a leadership position at the company, he asked me some really tough questions about what leadership meant to me and what was my leadership sort of philosophy. And I came away like, wow, I guess I better get a leadership philosophy. So I learned so much in the several years that Mike and I worked together. We stay in contact again. He's one of the people that I really admire in my career. So again, look for somebody that you admire, and whether you can connect with them directly or not, see how they've gotten to where they are. The other obvious question that people have in terms of career trajectory is whether to continue as an individual contributor or whether to move into management. So this is Nick Caldwell, currently the VP of engineering at Twitter, and he's given a wonderful wonderful talk a couple of years ago on how high performers can make the decision about whether they go as an individual contributor track or in a manager track. And one thing I do want to point out is that really high performing organizations have both tracks where you can be an individual contributor all the way up or a manager all the way up. So, and what we found, Yvette and I both, is that as a senior individual contributor, that definitely helps you in terms of learning how to manage, and then also managing people if you decide to go back to individual contributorship really helps you. So first off, it's okay to move between the tracks, even at relatively senior levels. Both Yvette and I have done that effectively, but also B, both the things that you learn as a senior individual contributor help you as a manager, and things that you learn as a manager help you as an individual contributor. The next thing I want to talk about is staying technical. And the idea here, which I relatively recently learned a couple months ago, is this idea of the technical maestro, that a bunch of these companies that we really admire have, even as management leaders, people that are very, very highly technical. So they're very high energy. They hold people to very high standards, both technically and sort of professionally. Even if they don't know all the details about something, they know how to ask the right questions and get the right sort of answers there, and they're very good on the details. This particular photo is from Gretchen Menn, who's the lead guitarist, a fantastic, like, world-class guitarist in a Bay Area Zeppelin cover band called Zepparella. So she's definitely a technical maestro in her area. But how do we stay technical? So, Yvette and I both have, gone into the management. We've crossed over to the dark side into management, but how do we stay technical? So there's a couple of different ways that Yvette and I recommend. Is one thing you can do, particularly earlier on in your career as you move from individual contributorship into management, is you can be involved in code reviews. Even if you're not writing the code, you didn't forget how the design patterns, and you didn't forget all the things, and you can definitely help from that perspective. And that helps keep you in the loop on what's going on. You can definitely help. You shouldn't be leading design and architecture if your full-time job is management, but you should definitely feel free to offer your opinions and suggestions and ask the right questions. It's something that Yvette and I both do quite a lot. Again, asking good questions. So, hey, somebody in your team proposes something or suggests something or estimates something, and just helping them by asking the right questions and make sure that they're thinking about it in the right way. Blogs and podcasts, there's more information available in our industry than ever before. And to the extent that we have spare time when we're running or doing something else like that, you can keep up with things that way. And then, not just because we're at a conference, but like Yvette and I both really sincerely believe that even as managers, coming to conferences and being involved in online communities, open source communities, hugely important to understand the landscape, what's going on out there, and that helps to ask the good questions. Hey, should we be using Kubernetes, or maybe shouldn't we be using Kubernetes, or something like that? So knowing what's going on in the industry can really help even as a manager. So now I'm going to hand it off to Yvette to talk about money for nothing.
Thanks. So, once you've figured out who you want to be, which is what Randy just, I think, inspired us all to think more about, the next step is to figure out, what do you want to optimize for in your career? Is that comp? Is that financial security, mission, work-life balance, the people you work with, fame? Something else, honestly. I think these are all good choices, and can move on to the next slide. Just like drinking tea in this illustrative example, or designing software, there are always trade-offs with everything you do, especially with how you're going to optimize your career. So I think the important thing has been deciding, what am I optimizing for right now? And that I'm clear and deliberate about it in that moment in time. What's right for me now versus what was right 10 years ago is pretty unique based on my goals, what gives me fulfillment, my past experiences. I also think one shouldn't ever stress or feel guilty optimizing for financial goals. Those are important, and taking care of oneself and one family. There should be no moral dilemma in that. Many people just don't have the privilege or pre-existing financial security and need to optimize for that. And for others, comp is just a great way to stay motivated, but don't ever feel guilty about it. I've also seen what I've optimized for really change over time, and I need to be at peace with that too. And optimizing for different things over a career arc reminds me a lot of how we all have to optimize for different things when we build a product through its different stages, right? So For example, we optimize for learning and finding product market fit, which is where I'm at with my team right now, when we're in more startup mode. And then we optimize for operationalizing when we're in the growth stage. And we solve a whole set of other problems of scale once we've reached a certain scale. And change is great for career growth. It keeps things exciting. I found it so helpful to regularly reflect about it. I learned from a coach once to do kind of an annual retro style reflection once a year, kind of at the end of the year, to make things more deliberate. I don't do that every year, but I try to do it some years. But for example, last year I was looking for a new job, and coach reminded me to take the time to write down what were my personal, like, real deal breakers with my next role, as well as the least important things. And after doing that, I learned that the single most important thing for me was being part of a peer exec team who I could seriously learn from and wanted to grow with me. And in that moment in time, that was my deal breaker. I really felt like I needed to be surrounded by peers with a shared growth mindset after feeling so isolated during COVID and at my last couple of jobs. So that's what I optimized for most recently. So many people in our industry, do stress about compensation, right? And as I mentioned before, optimizing for that is totally okay if that's what's right for you. Just one watch out, though, that I feel like I need to call out, which is optimizing for near-term comp may not and often won't drive that long-term fulfillment, wealth, safety that you're after. And Randy and I talked a lot about this. Think about comp as a series of stages too, and series of risks versus reward decisions that you take. For example, I was in a privileged position to be okay taking, frankly, a cash comp cut at my current job, but I'm super excited about the long-term potential of equity growth, right? And that's where I'm at right now. And the career fulfillment I'm getting is pretty much priceless to me. So if you get turned around and stressed about comp, Randy actually said this. He says this to himself and to other people a lot, and I'm totally stealing this line. Try asking yourself, why am I not working in investment banking, right? Because if you were optimizing for near-term comp, that's where you make the most money right now. So why aren't you just doing that? You're smart, you could do it. So ask yourself that and revisit, like, why is working in tech, so motivating and fulfilling to you to begin with, and really think about that and optimize for it more. All right, so now you know who you are, what you're optimizing for. The big question is, how do you know you found the right place to do it, right? Well, that right place for me has always been someplace that took a chance on me, as Abba would say. There's so many reasons to join a company, right? From a career growth perspective, I found it so important to find colleagues who will be great sponsors and coaches and take big bets on me, especially looking back earlier in my career where you can bend the curve the most. If you can bend that curve, you're set up with so many options later. I had three, looking back, when Randy and I were talking about this, I kind of talked through three memorable moments for me, just like he just kind of talked you through, a few of those memorable leaders for him. When someone took a chance on me in those three moments, and looking back, it's really clear that those three bets opened up so many doors for me as I navigated my career path, and probably opened them up way earlier than I expected them to happen. The first one was my second job ever, just 2 years out of college. My manager at the time, Matthew, offered me a tech lead, team lead role that I never imagined I was ready for. To be perfectly honest, I probably wasn't, but we were growing fast and someone had to do it. So I took it, I think I definitely bent my curve really fast, learning how to be a better leader and communicator. And then about 10 years ago, Nick, the CTO at the company I worked at, offered me a GM role to manage a team in Costa Rica when I'd never done a job like that before. I'd kind of grown up technical engineering leadership ranks, and I didn't even speak Spanish yet. He encouraged me to take it and frankly told me he knew I could do it. And that role unlocked so many doors for me as far as broader leadership roles in the future. One of which was when I met Scott, the founder of Meetup. He took a chance on me as a first-time CTO. That was my first CTO role before I'd ever done it before. And he asked me during our first coffee why he should hire me instead of the other leaders who had worked at places like Twitter and Google and Facebook. And all I can say is I guess he liked my answer enough. So how do you find these amazing sponsors? I'm so grateful for mine. I think you just know it when you see it. I ask tons of questions. I get lots of discussion going when I'm interviewing, and I really try to get to know my manager and speak with them multiple times during the process. Make sure I push on speaking with more people than they even want me to, more senior people. I try to get a real sense for whether or not my manager and the company culture is set up to help for, help growth. And I just try to get as many data points as possible through conversations with different people, asking them the same question. But I really end up going with my gut personally. And, in talking with Randy, he was like, yeah, I go with my gut too, right? So this is a real relationship building type of people judgment call that you have to make. So don't be afraid to go with your gut. And speaking of people, tell us your approach to people and companies next, Randy.
Great, thanks, Yvette. Yeah, so apologies to the clash, but should I stay or should I go? So this is about trying to figure out what company, whether to stay at your company or go to the next one, and if so, which next one. So the first thing I think is really important to think about is the culture and the value of the values of the company. So does the company culture, like as experienced through your interview process, or as we'll talk about later, if you hopefully have people in your network that work at the potential company you're thinking about, does that company culture align with your personal values? And again, I'll just reiterate what Yvette said earlier, which is, by the way, like if what you need is you need to provide financial support for your family, like that's okay. It's privilege for us to be able to think about these things. But to the extent that you can, it really matters for your happiness. So does the company value you? And you can tell through the interview process pretty clearly whether this is just like they're like really care about you personally, or you're just a cog in their recruiting wheel or in their recruiting machine. Do they value the contributions of the role that you're considering, right? So again, that's something that you should definitely try to ask for directly or indirectly through the interview process. Is this something where the thing that you're going to do or that you potentially do at the company actually matters to the company? Are they going to matter? Again, is your role going to matter to the company? And then also something that I have found over and over again, and I have yet to find the counterexample, is the culture of the company comes straight from the top. So all you have to do is look at the CEO of the company and see what he or she is like. And that will tell you everything you need to know about the culture of the company. So, I've worked at lots of different places, big and small and in between. And, Google was founded by two nerdy engineers, and Google is a nerdy engineer company. Kixeye, the gaming company that I worked for, was founded by a not so nice person, but he was brilliant, and it was a not so nice culture. That had a lot of issues. Ditto eBay. I've worked at eBay under 3 separate CEOs, and it's more or less been a different company under each of them. So I really do encourage you to look carefully at what the CEO is like. That will tell you a lot about the company. There's a little, but also in terms of choosing companies, there's something that I'll call the halo effect. And that the company's reputation doesn't just affect your experience of potentially working there, it affects how people perceive you in the future. So like somebody who worked at Facebook, okay, well, we think something about that person because of how Facebook behaves. Somebody who worked at Google, somebody who worked at Netflix, somebody who worked at, one of these other places. And that halo can be both positive and negative, but just keep that in mind. Like your company's reputation, you sort of attaches to you a little bit as you go along through your career. And so is the company known for, hey, this is a fast growth place, in which case the assumption of future employers is that you know how to do fast growth. That's great. Is it known for strong engineering, as several of the brands I just mentioned are? If so, the assumption, the going in assumption is that you know how to do strong engineering. Is it known for being good, for being evil? And then the other thing that I want to say is, after your first or second job, What doesn't matter is your education, whether you have one or not. Like I rarely, when I'm looking at candidates, care much about the degrees that people have or where they got them. What does matter, though, is what people have done in their career and where they did it. And so, again, this is particularly, for the younger, for the people that are earlier in their career. It's great that you have that educational background, and mine certainly has helped me a lot. But there are lots of people in our industry that have no degrees at all, and they're fantastically successful, and literally nobody is judging them for that. So, that's, I think, something to keep in mind. Now I want to talk a little bit about titles, because that's a thing when you're thinking about, oh, should I take this particular title at the next place? Well, honestly, titles do matter, and it's a privilege. Anybody who says titles don't matter is coming from a very privileged place. And at the same time, though, they're not necessarily equivalent at different places. So one of the things that I have definitely found is that, this is my wording, but titles are sort of scaled by the size and maturity of the company. So a principal engineer at Google or Netflix is not the same as a principal engineer at a 5 or 10 person startup. Doesn't mean better or worse, but like it has to, when it's at the bigger company, the assumption for everybody is that it actually is a larger scope and a bigger role. Similarly for the management type of things, right? So a director at Google manages at minimum 100 to 200 people, up to 800 people. So that's like a whole company in lots of other places. And a VP at Google, just as an example, is minimum 1,000 people in their organization, usually 2,000 or 3,000. So those are just personal examples that I have. But people are going to be scaling that. Like, oh, you were an XYZ title, but they're also going to look at where that was, and they're going to kind of scale from there. The other thing that's really important as you choose where to go is where are you going to learn and where are you going to have influence. So one of the little made up equations that Yvette and I came up with when we were talking about this talk was opportunity comes from a combination of your being available to take those opportunities, plus essentially your own kind of personal competence and excellence. So you need to put those two things together to decide whether to take a particular opportunity or whether you're going to be given one. Staying short term at a place and going to the next place, pretty quickly will restart the learning curve, and that's okay. Like that means you're going to, steep learning curves are really good. So that's something that, to be said for short-term stays, but longer-term stays optimize more for longer-term learning. And I don't think you really learn your job for at least a year at a place. And longer term stays do actually ultimately optimize for influence in those areas. So I think all of us have probably worked in places where people that are the long timers, have an outsized influence over and above, what their particular role, you would think from their role. So, both have pros and cons, but you should just understand what those particular things are. So sometimes people are like, well, I can't leave my place because, I've only been there for a short period of time or something like that. That has actually not been a problem in my personal experience. And also, as a hiring manager of people, I don't, just because somebody stayed at a place for a year or less, that isn't necessarily a knock, as long as you explain it clearly. So pretending that that's not a thing is probably not a good idea, but just simply saying, you know what? This was a horrible culture and I hated every day that I went to work. That's actually an okay thing to say. So just explain whatever it is, or I had a much better opportunity and, I stayed there for a year and then I went somewhere else. But just simply explaining that, it's going to be fine. So people that worried about they should stay longer just because otherwise it'll look bad, I haven't really seen that to be true. Taking whatever you want to call it, sabbaticals or time away from working, whether that's to travel the world or have a child or something like that, those are not knocks on your career. In fact, stated very confidently, you know what? I just took these 2 years because I was, I was raising having my kid and raising my kid. That's a sign of strength. I do encourage people, if that's something that you really feel passionate about, all you have to do is explain it, and most employers are totally fine with it. The other thing is, failure is a learning opportunity. So after I worked at eBay the first time a bunch of years ago, I left to co-found a startup with another eBay colleague of mine. No one in the room has ever heard of it because it was only the two of us and it didn't last very long. So we were definitely in the 99% as opposed to the 1%. And I will say openly, I was really afraid of the next set of conversations I would have in my career, because wouldn't that be a big stigma or a big black mark on, Randy's career? And like, no one has ever thought bad about it, because they said, oh, what did you learn from that startup experience? And of course, we made lots of mistakes, so we learned a ton. And so just being able to explain all those things that I learned and what we would have done differently the next time, huge learning opportunity, and is not a problem going forward. Failure is not punished in our industry. And again, as Yvette said, particularly earlier in your career, when you don't have as much riding on it, and also, frankly, later in your career when maybe you've reached a level of like sufficiency in terms of your personal or financial or family setup. Those are the great times to take risks. Last couple of things I want to say here is use your network. So when you're thinking about where to go next, who to work with, definitely talk with people in your network, because they will help give you options about where to go next, and tell you where give you some good advice. Yvette and I both have had this experience where, again, we've been around for quite a while in the industry, both of us. Almost every job we've ever had has come through our networks. I have had one job after my first one job out of whatever, let's call them 10, where it came through a recruiter. Everything else was through some kind of network connection. And Yvette had the same experience where I think it was maybe 2 in her career, where it came through a recruiter. So anyway, developing that network is hugely valuable. Even if the only thing you care about is like where to get your next job. Like, it's great for lots of reasons, but like it definitely can help going forward. So the last thing I want to say in this section is never burn a bridge. What do I mean by that? I mean, this is a very small industry, and anytime anybody is thinking about hiring you, they're going to back channel, right? They're going to find some people that maybe in common, and they're going to ask. This is more and more important as you get into more and more senior roles. And so not burning the bridge behind you and making everybody, basically behaving professionally and kindly and competently and with excellence. Those are the things that get remembered. And they're remembered 10 years down the road, 15, 20 years down the road. Being not a nice person is remembered even longer. So I do strongly recommend that you not be mean to people. Okay, back to you, Yvette.
Thanks, Randy. So in addition to not burning bridges, like how do you build them? Well, living in the limelight is one really important thing that Randy and I both just felt like we had to include on this path to CTO. It's so important to get outside the 4 walls of the company that you work at to learn and to teach. And just like Randy said, it all starts with networking and a growth mindset with that networking. The best tech leaders I know are always looking to learn from people inside and outside of tech too. And I've found my best resource for growth and fulfillment has been building a community of practice of folks outside the current company I work at, and force myself to reach out and speak with other leaders often. Randy and I hadn't talked in a while, and I forget who reached out first, but one of us said, hey, you want to catch up and talk shop soon, right? In the middle of COVID. And then soon after we did a talk together again. But reaching out to other leaders often for peer coaching, advice, support. It's often being really lonely as an engineering leader. I feel that way all the time. So I personally take the approach of just always be networking, because every time I meet a new person or an old friend in the industry for a coffee, I leave so energized, so inspired. And I also know that we can help each other in the future when we're trying to solve a tough problem, or as Randy just said, when we're looking for a new job. The other side of networking and learning from others is just getting out there and teaching. As Richard Feynman, who's a 1965 Nobel Prize winning physicist, way smart dude. If you want to master something, teach it. Our industry's culture of open source and sharing knowledge just makes it so easy and fulfilling to learn and give back to the community by teaching. And there are so many ways to learn by teaching. That's a win for us as individuals because it grows our own personal brand and network, and we learn a lot by doing it. But also, like, it's a real win-win-win, right? It's a win for the company because it's brand building and instant recruiting for them, and a win for the community because we're giving back some of the knowledge that we have. And one unlock for me a while back was realizing that there are so many different ways to brand build and teach and become part of the community, and how important it was to find ones that excite you the most, but also as a leader to coach people to finding the ones that excite them the most. A lot of quiet engineers are like, how could I ever do that, right? So that could be writing blog posts or even a book, longer form writing. Or, posting short form on Twitter if long form is just too intimidating and freaks you out, right? Speaking at or organizing great conferences like this, or if all those things are too intimidating and you just want to be one with the code, being a regular open source contributor. Don't get the hives from speaking, right? Like just be part of the open source contribution community and focus on the tech. Every time I've forced myself to take time out and participate in the greater community like this, I've gotten way more out of it than I put into it. But no matter what you choose, as leaders, we always need to be able to tell a great story. It's such a critical skill we need to hone, just like a technical one. If we can't tell a great story, our career will be limited. Honestly, it just will. If you don't want to be a VP or CTO and want to stay on the maker track even, and just be a principal engineer someday, being a great storyteller will really help you get there and really help you influence. And that's why Randy and I have tried to sprinkle our talk today with a lot of personal stories, right? And tell those stories. In a month, you probably won't remember any of these slides or most of what we say, but you might remember our personal stories. That's what's gonna stick in your head. Prove me wrong, let me know. First off, so when you're interviewing for a leadership role, just like Randy said, you're gonna have a huge advantage if you can effectively tell the story of your career arc, right? Doesn't matter if you left a job after a year with your failed startup. If you can tell that story, you're gonna be golden. And then once you land the job, storytelling will help you connect and build those relationships when you start someplace. When I worked at Meetup, I went on a listening tour the first couple of months I was there. I met with about 70 people one-on-one, which was a lot, but well worth it. And I asked them, like, what changes and improvements do you think we should do? Do you want to see? And I ended up putting all that information together into a readout, right? A listening tour readout, and talked about how excited I was to empower all the meetuppers there to do those things and the impact that I thought it would have on the company as a new leader coming in from the outside. I even turned that talk into my monthly new hire lunch and learn onboarding talk for new folks joining the company. But didn't really matter what I said. The most effective part of my story was just how personal it was and how authentic the emotion coming through, because I was genuinely so excited to start on all of those things, and so happy to just hear all everybody's ideas, and it inspired me as a new person. So once you connect with folks and build those relationships, you're going to need to figure out how to influence and convince others, both inside and outside your own team, in order to get on board with your ideas. If you can't do this effectively, it doesn't matter how great your ideas are. You could be the most brilliant person on the planet with all the right ideas, right? I remember I've done this poorly so many times, even though I'm giving you this really clear advice, but there was one time I was rolling out first engineering org at a healthcare company I worked at, and the exec team was all from the healthcare industry, and they didn't understand engineering or product teams. And this was my first time working in healthcare. And I just didn't do a good enough job of telling my story from their perspective. I didn't meet them where they were coming from. I didn't tell a story that they could really relate to. So instead of alignment and excitement about my new org, which is what I hoped for, I just got constant questions and doubts about the org and why I was organizing things that way, until I figured out, like, wow, I really have to tell a better story here that just fit into their existing mental models and met them where they were. And then finally, once you use storytelling to influence, sustain your influence by consistently inspiring and motivating folks with your ideas. Scott, the CEO at Meetup, once told me that the best advice he ever got from Bill Bradley, who was a member of the, long ago now, sadly, for New York fans, the NBA Knicks championship team in the 70s. He was a key part of that. He was also an early Meetup board member. And, Bill told Scott that as a leader, you need to, and I think I'm quoting Bill here, paint a picture of paradise for your team and constantly paint and repaint that picture until they can envision it and almost touch and feel what it's going to feel like with you. And that often just takes telling the story in different ways. It feels like 10 or more times, but once others can really see that paradise themselves, they're with you and they're going to stay motivated and inspired along with you. All right. So to wrap things up, none of the advice Randy and I is leaving with you today is valuable if you can't figure out how to sustain yourself over the long road to becoming a CTO. And Eddie Vedder did a cover of that way back when. I'm sure so many of you have felt particularly burnout the last couple of years. I know I have during difficult pandemic times. But even in normal times, if we don't actively work to find our right work-life balance, the default path, frankly, on the path to CTO is burnout. Don't get caught on that default path, and instead, figure out a way to prioritize what you need to sustain over time. I have some suggestions for how to do that, but honestly, it's something I and most other senior engineering leaders I know struggle with regularly and talk about regularly. So take the time to try things and be patient with yourself. I've definitely learned that I've more intentionally designed my own career path, especially lately, and actively set myself up for that right balance. When I do that, I'm just happier and I'm healthier. One way I've done that is to not challenge myself to climb up, up, up all the time. I've spread the climbing out over time. And, for example, I had to be at peace with not always needing to take a role that's a title up from where I was. Even though, as Randy mentioned, titles are important, it's your career arc and story that makes those titles all fit together, right? And I realized not only will trying to just climb up, up, up all the time sometimes lead to me missing a role that could be perfect for me at that moment in time, but that I'll likely burn myself out trying for the next title jump. Same thing goes for team size or company you join. Bigger often doesn't mean better, right? In a lot of cases. I once went from a team of 125 engineers to 25 recently in my career, and learned more from working with that small but insanely high performing team that I did in my previous bigger role. And going back a bit or holding where you are in some areas is sometimes just what you need in order to design your career arc in the right way over time. When I left my role as a CTO at Meetup, where my team was that 125 engineers, when I took that smaller company job, it was a VP job at a health tech startup. And at the time, I was just so excited to do that. I can't tell you how excited I was to do that, because I was really burnt out. I was staring at spreadsheets all day, figuring out how to manage board of directors. I was so far away from the work. I was pretty depressed. I didn't like firing up my computer and going to work every day. Doing that type of work you need to do when you're at a C-level. So I took a VP job, and I wasn't sure. It was a little bit of a risk, and I thought it would help me, and honestly, it did. I was once again so close to the work of building and shipping software product, which is what I love to do, and really in it with the teams. I was in stand-ups every day. I knew, I was helping them solve problems. It was so much fun. And I learned so much too. I learned a lot more about how to, in a more modern stack, make the sausage, which has helped me after that. And I didn't have to interact with the board or worry about company-wide level things. Someone else was handling that, and I trusted him, and that's one of the reasons I joined. And that's why, you know, I just really needed at that moment to reinvigorate my love and passion for my work. And without that, I'm not sure what I'd be doing now. I'd probably be a lot less happy. All right, so last but not least, I do want to mention, I do currently work at a wellness and fitness company called Exos. You might see, there we go. We coach everyone from Olympic and professional athletes to employees at companies like Google and Intel on how to be healthier, high performers. That's our specialty. I joined a little over a year ago in the middle of a pandemic, burnt out, and somewhat depressed from my previous couple of years and jobs. And to better understand our product and our customers and what they might value, I decided to really dog food our own products and services, our coaching services, as much as possible. And I've personally just seen how taking care of my health and wellness has positively impacted my life and job happiness and fulfillment. You know, like I said, I had a rough stretch of burnout and emotional exhaustion. I'd lost my love of my work for a little while. But basically, I was just really stressed, also really stressed at home. I felt like I was barely making it through week to week sometimes, especially in the middle of that pandemic at the beginning. And, you know, since I've joined and started living the product, I'm doing breath work and mindset exercises, taking vitamin supplements and trying to eat a higher variety of stuff, and doing strength training, all of those things regularly now. It's easy. I work here, right? It's so tangible. And I'm working hard right now. My biggest challenge is getting enough sleep every night. And that's really hard for me. So I'm working hard on that one. But I have to say, I haven't felt this satisfied, happy, and productive in a job in probably over a decade or so, I'd have to say. And that's translated to my personal life, my family life. I feel like I've extended my career longevity a bunch as well. And that, like, yeah, I could keep doing this a lot more years. I'm pretty old. I'm not ready to throw it in a few years anymore. So I really feel like I'm living the dream right now, and encourage, you know, y'all to ruthlessly prioritize, you know, adding even just a bit of recovery and self-care activities to your days to help train that critical muscle of sustainability. I'm living it and would love to bring that to others. So it is true. It's a long way to the top if you want a CTO, right? So I hope you not only take with you some strategies and practices for how to get there, but also the inspiration to design sustainability throughout that long road. So thanks for everyone. That's what we have today for listening to our talk. And Randy and I would love to take some questions now. So please ask away.
Questions everywhere. We have some questions online. What about the audience here? Do we have a question? We don't have a question. Sold. Okay. Tomir is asking with regards to the topic of burning bridges. What should you do when it's the other party burning the bridge, behaving unprofessionally?
Oh, great question. That doesn't reflect on you. So I wouldn't worry about, I wouldn't worry about it from that perspective. I mean, I've definitely had, I'm not going to go into the details, but I've definitely worked with people that are toxic and unprofessional, and you just tell your side of the story to the extent that that's useful in future conversations. Yeah, but the critical thing is that, you know, all of us should always try to behave professionally and kindly and maturely. That's remembered.
Be kind, be lovely. Okay, one more question from the online chat. Ernestus is asking, what's the proper time to change jobs? Is it limited by 1, 2, 3, several years, or is it limited by something else according to you?
Wow. I mean, you know, my initial reaction, I'd love to hear what Randy thinks too, but I don't know. I as your coach, I'd ask you, what do you want out of your job now? And are you getting that fulfillment, right? In all those areas we spoke about, what do you want to get in the future? And are you getting the things now that will help you get there? And you know, Randy mentioned this, you know, I worked at a job for a year or two. I'm sure Randy learned more starting his startup and working there for a short time than he probably could have at any job at that point in his career, because like we all learn from our failures the most, right? So I don't know if there's an answer to that other than, you know, kind of reflecting, maybe doing that retro, like what am I getting out of my current role, current job? Where do I want to go? What's the next step? And go from there. I don't know, Randy, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to go back to one of your sections, which is what are you optimizing for, right? So, I mean, it's a great question, Ernestas. I mean, don't think we're making fun of the question in any way. The answer is complicated, and if the answer is very personal, you know, to you, if what you're looking for is continued like learning, this is the thing that really motivates me. Like I had no career plan except for I want to learn new things. And so for me, it's always been when that learning curve goes from really steep to flat, then I start to look for the next thing. But it's okay to optimize for financial security. It's okay to optimize for, you know what, for a couple of years, like we just had a child in the house or something like that. Like I want the job to be, you know, not the major stressor, you know, so you really have to think, I think, for yourself, but hopefully Yvette and I have given you some things that you can think about. And there's no, again, just to restate, there's no a priori thing that says 1 year stay is bad, a 10-year stay is bad, right? Like if you keep learning, I work with people that have worked at eBay for more than 20 years and they keep learning and learning and learning. I have many in not just one, but many in my group, and they've kept learning and changing jobs and doing different things and so on. So there's no right answer in general. There's just a right answer for you, I think.
Yeah, and not only is it a great question, it's like it's the existential great question, right? And as Randy said, like, is there some theme that's so important to you over time, like Randy's, like just keep learning, right? That's kind of like Randy's personal culture and brand, I imagine, that he thinks about inside him. I'm trying to think of what mine is, and I think it is really related to learning as well, but I also lean heavily on, do I feel part of a team that's moving forward and I'm learning from? So I really want to be learning, but I want to be learning with other humans around me who inspire and motivate me, because I work best that way. So I often draw on that when I look at that question.
Okay, thank you very much. And do we have any questions from the audience? Did somebody wake up with a realization? No, great, because we have one last question in the chat, and this is a really short answer. Algirdas is asking, what kind of retro, I assume retrospective, do you do at the end of the year? Do you do the simple start, stop, continue format or something else?
I think you can make it your own. I love the idea. What a great idea to stick with the tried and true start, stop, continue format. I often think of a few questions that let me look back on the year. Things like, did I accomplish the goals I wanted to this year? Did I get out of this year what I wanted to in my career growth? What are some areas that I feel like are new that came up during this year, right? So I actually keep like a running little notes doc with some questions like that, so that I can, maybe even if it's not formally, I can just have them in my head at year end, because it's always a good time to reflect and just think about, like, how is this all going? And I don't know, Randy, do you do anything like that?
I probably should. I should have had a career plan too, by the way. But no, I agree 100% with Yvette. My thing is less planned, but more like when I'm on vacation or mentally like not thinking about work, that often gives me some truths. Wow, I'm really not learning anymore. Or wow, maybe I should, try something else or something like that. Anyway, great question and a good one to end on.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us this year too. We are obviously not the first time and hopefully not the last time we see you here in Build Stuff, and that's it.